What's up everyone, Dr. Jordan here, back in the gym as always, and today's video is just gonna be all about the barbell back squat. One of my favorite exercises, I love to do it. It's a great foundational exercise for building strong and powerful legs and glutes. One of the most common complaints that I get from patients coming into the office is having lower back pain after doing barbell back squats. A lot of people feel like it's normal if your back is feeling sore or achy after you do back squats. That's not the case. You shouldn't be having soreness. So I'm gonna walk you through some form tips, things that I do to help me get through this exercise without having any discomfort or tension in my lower back. Just like when we're building a house, you want to start by building a good foundation, a good strong foundation. That's the same when we're doing an exercise like a barbell back squat. The foundation, which starts at our feet, is going to be super important for this movement. For me, when I do this exercise, I have my feet a little wider than hip width apart and my toes are slightly pointed outward. A lot of that just comes down to how it works for my anatomy. I don't have super great hip mobility just because the way my hip sockets are fashioned. I've spent years trying to improve my hip mobility and realized that I have anatomical limits. We all do, and I'm just not going to have a super deep squat in a neutral position like this. But if I turn my feet out to the side, it allows me to get a little bit more depth out of my hips and a deeper squat, so I can make sure I'm getting my glutes engaged at the bottom of that motion. I used to always fall into the trap of feeling like my feet had to be pointing straight ahead and they had to stay right under my knees and hips as I was doing this exercise, and that just doesn't work for my anatomy. So if you're just like me and you have trouble doing barbell back squats with your feet pointing forward, even if you try and elevate your heels or wear squatting shoes, if it just doesn't work with you, you can do the same thing. Turn your feet out to the side, bring them a little bit wider than hip width apart, and that'll be a great way for you to execute this movement. So here's how I build my foundation. Rather than starting with my feet pointing straight ahead and keeping them about hip width apart, I go a little wider than hip width and I turn them both out to 45 degrees. From this position here, I try and engage the arch of my foot by grabbing into the bottom of my shoes or into the ground with my toes, and then externally rotating my tibias to really engage the arch of my foot. From there, I'm slowly descending into my squat to help me keep a stable foundation and build that strong base for this movement. The next aspect that we want to look after we have our feet set and we've built a strong base down there is to make sure that our knees are tracking over our toes as we're going down into the squat. So a lot of times people have issues with their knees caving in as they're going into a squat or having one side engaged more than the other. We want to focus on pushing our legs out or imagining that there's a band around our knees and that we're driving through that band to keep our knees out over our toes as we're getting to the bottom of our squat here. Doing this will help us to keep from having any knee issues while we're doing this exercise. If you are having problems with your knees caving in during this movement, that can be an indication of some weakness into your glutes. And here's a great way that you can try and train that movement to help decrease your knees caving in during the exercise. So if you're having problems with your knees caving in during this exercise, placing a band around the top of your knees and then practicing squatting while driving your knees out during the movement can help you to get the feel and the proper glute engagement that you should feel at the bottom of your squat and keep those knees from caving in during the movement. So you can do it with the bar on your back, or you can warm up without the bar on your back. Band around your knees, and then from here, same thing, building that strong foundation and then squatting down and driving your knees out towards the bottom of the movement. So the element of this movement that I see people most commonly fail in when they have lower back pain or when they come in with lower back pain after doing back squats is this portion right here. It's the hip hinge. A lot of times we're building a butt when we're doing squats. That's the goal of this exercise. We're trying to get strong legs and strong glutes. But a lot of people have the tendency while we're doing this to try to look sexy, and you want to stick your butt out while you're descending. What that's doing is it's taking your core out of the equation and putting a lot more stress and tension on your lumbar spine. Instead of unlocking your lower back and going into extension and sticking your butt out, what you want to do is try to keep your core tight as you're doing this exercise. So you actually want the opposite of sticking your butt out. You want to kind of have that ugly butt posture where your hips are tucked in underneath you, and then from this position here, you're slightly hinging back and then descending. And as you're descending, your lower back will start to naturally go into its normal curvature, but you don't want to unlock that at the top of the range of motion. So here's how it looks in practice. Good. So foundation is set, feet are out of 45. I'm engaging the arch of my foot, tibias are externally rotated, and from here, pelvis is tucked, and I'm descending into the motion. And coming back up, tucking my pelvis back underneath me. What I see a lot of people do is instead of keeping their pelvis tucked as they start the hip hinge, they extend in their lumbar spine and then hinge forward more. And that puts a lot more stress and tension on your lumbar spine during the movement. This is what I want to see from your lower back and hips when you're doing the movement. This is what I don't want to see. So the last piece that we got to talk about with this is we've built a good foundation. We've got our knee drive, we've got our hips positioned properly and making sure that we're doing the proper hip hinge motion. The last piece that we need to do is making sure that we're creating stiffness into our upper back. The weight is being placed on our traps and upper back. Although this is a lower body exercise, we still want to make sure that we're creating some stiffness in this area so that we can handle the weight in that position. Now, a common mistake that I'll see a lot of people do, and this might be a shoulder mobility issue, but when a lot of people get underneath the squat bar, whether it's because they don't have the proper shoulder mobility or they think it looks cool, instead of getting under with our elbows tucked and lats engaged, I will see some people get under the squat bar with their arms out to the side like this. Now, if this is a shoulder mobility issue for you, I would rather you go over and use like a power squat or some other type of machine to do your squats rather than getting to this position, because it's just really hard to be able to create the proper stiffness that you need in this position here. If you are someone who has shoulder mobility issues when trying to get under the squat bar and getting in the proper position is tough, then do some shoulder mobility work before you get under the bar to do this exercise. Alternatives like hack squats and power squats are good exercises that you can do in the meantime until you can learn to create that proper stiffness in your upper back. So here's how I want you to think about creating stiffness in your upper back and engaging your lats when you're doing this movement. I really like the analogy of trying to bend the bar when you're doing exercises. It works for me with deadlifts. It's kind of the same thing here with the barbell back squat. When you're underneath it, I want to try and bend the bar on my back. And the way that I'm gonna do that is by tucking my elbows and really squeezing into my lats here. From there, as I lift up, I'm keeping that stiffness in the area. It's helping me to keep that tension in my upper back underneath the bar so that I can handle the weight that's on my shoulders. From there, I'm doing everything else the same. I'm setting my foundation, making sure the arch of my foot is engaged, keeping my knees out over my toes, keeping my pelvis tucked as I start the movement, and then descending into that hip hinge, keeping that stiffness in my upper back. You want to keep those elbows tucked and lats engaged as you're doing this movement here. So those are my key points for you when you're doing the barbell back squat exercise. It's one of my favorite movements, but it's important that you make sure that you're paying attention to these areas of your body. Build the foundation in your feet. Make sure you have that great knee drive, a proper hip hinge, and keeping that stiffness in your upper back. If you can do those 4 things for me during your barbell back squat, it's going to help to keep you from developing lower back pain when you're doing this movement and allow you to have a powerful barbell back squat. As always, thank you guys for watching. Do all those fun things, like, comment, subscribe, reach out to me in any way. I'm here to help you guys. I'll see you at the next one.